Good afternoon, everyone. I know that I'm interrupting your lunch, so I'll try to be as interesting as possible to make this time worth it for you and make sure that I am inspiring you to be inspired by technology and not just limit yourself to what the customer needs. So let me start with a short example of what I want to tell you about. So how many of you know this device? You must have seen it in the market, on people, them using it. It's a continuous glucose monitor, and it's a product that's developed by Dexcom, and it has been taking up about 75% of the market share. So Dexcom has now become a leader in the market when it comes to continuous glucose monitoring. But monitoring the blood glucose levels of diabetic patients was not always looking like this. So there was a time when it used to look like this. It was bulky, it was ugly, and it was not very comfortable. And this was actually developed by Medtronic. So Medtronic was the company that actually started the revolution in monitoring blood glucose. And the story of blood glucose monitoring is quite long. So shortly, I can tell you that Medtronic started with this mini-med device that they brought into the market. And then they also developed the first wireless continuous glucose monitor. So they were doing quite well. And then Dexcom came in, and they first developed it integrated with an insulin pump, right? Now, the problem is that Medtronic, although they started with the continuous glucose monitoring system, they didn't trust it. Because customers, when they were asked, what do you need from a continuous glucose monitor? They used to say, we just need it to be convenient. Can you make the device a little bit smaller? It's a little bit irritating to my skin. Can you make the adhesive a little bit better? So Medtronic decided to focus on that. While Dexcom actually decided that we want to focus on wireless continuous glucose monitoring. They kept developing that. So they integrated that with a mobile device. They developed an app, et cetera. And yeah, like I told you, now they have 75% of the market share. So what does this tell you? You can't always trust your customer to tell you what they need in the future. They don't know the technology that exists out there. They don't know what is possible. You know that. You, as a technology development company, know that. So trust your technology more than your customer. That's the first point. And this is actually a very common dilemma. How many of you have seen or heard about this term, innovator's dilemma? It's something that everyone comes across, even if you don't know it by that terminology. And there's also a very nice book on it. So I'll recommend all of you to read it. It's quite nice, especially if you are into innovation. And I can give you another more colloquial example of that. So I can give you the example of Apple and Intel. So Intel was the market leader in chips, and then Apple was their customer, and they wanted certain kinds of chips. Apple wanted chips that were faster, right? So in this case, the requirement did come from the consumer. But Intel said, the rest of the market doesn't need this, so we can't really put our money where we probably might not earn that much money from the rest of the market other than you, right? And Apple decided, OK, if you are not going to give this technology to me, I'm going to develop it myself. So now Apple produces its own ARM chips, the M1 chip, if you must have heard of it, in its latest devices. especially for mobile devices, has been a revolution in the industry. And this was not brought about by Intel, and look where that got Intel. Like, the red mark is all over the page, and that's something that also we can learn from, because big corporates are very often thinking from the direction of the customer, because they're thinking, okay, we need to drive revenue. We can't think like a startup. So the question is, how can large corporates and startups innovate successfully in today's time? Because today we don't live in the same world that we lived in 50 or 100 years ago. The speed with which technology is improving, the speed with which technology has been transforming itself has become much faster. So although before you could think about, okay, what do the customers need? What do I need to deliver to them? Today you can't think like that. Because if you start asking the customer, what do you want to see in the future, they are going to tell you just something cheaper, something a little bit smaller, but there's not going to be any disruptive potential in their needs, right? And this is where this kind of thinking comes in, which is technology-inspired thinking. So with this, you actually think about, what might the world look like tomorrow? What problems can be solved in 10 years from now instead of tomorrow? What impact will my new technology have 10 years from today? And which problems do we want to solve for a customer that might not even be in our portfolio today, 10 years from now? So maybe this is a good place to tell you a little bit about what problems we, as Zeiss, solve. So what is Zeiss all about, is the question. I'm sure that some of you might not even have heard of the company Zeiss. Are we all about building microscopes? Because that's what most of us know by, even if you've seen us in the optical stores, right? So either you think we make lenses, or the academics think that we make microscopes. But that's not entirely true, because we are spread across 4 different market segments. So we are all the way from semiconductors to consumer products. And these market segments make a lot of money. But from the money that we are making, so 15% of the revenue that we make actually goes into R&D and innovation. And this is actually one of the highest market standard numbers, because most companies, especially at the scale of Zeiss, will not be very comfortable investing 15% of their revenue into R&D, right? But this R&D has also produced some award-winning innovation. And this innovation is not just winning awards, but it's also transforming the industry. One such example is actually EUV lithography. And to give you a very quick context of what EUV lithography does, is we are helping our customers, including ASML, build chips that are much accurately built, right? So we are enabling accuracy, we are enabling precision. And this accuracy would not have been possible with the standard methods, because it's a completely new technology. You cannot enable EUV lithography with lenses. You need a very different kind of mirror for that, right? So do we stop here, is the question. Do we say, OK, we've made the industry standard now, so let's just stick to it, let's make some money from it? But we don't say that. We want to disrupt ourselves, because we know that even though we might not be thinking about it, our competitors might look at our product today and think, OK, how can we make this better? How can we take the technology that Zeiss has brought into the market, bring improvements to it, and disrupt them? So the only solution to that is to actually disrupt yourself. And we are doing that by producing new technology that can enable a new kind of system that produces even better chips. So now we are enabling high NA lithography, right? So all this magic that you see on the screen, that it takes 25 years of development, it has taken so and so man-hours, all of this takes a lot of money, right? And the money comes from the customers. So the trick is, can you actually take help from your customers to not listen to them? So can your customers help you not listen to them? And apparently, it is possible, actually, to do that. Because although we were the ones who were selling our EUV lithography systems to ASML, they said, take our money and develop even better things. We trust you with the technology, right? So here, that's really the keyword. The keyword is the technology that this money is enabling. Because even if you have €1 billion, I could give you €1 billion today and ask you to transform an industry, and you wouldn't know where to start, right? And most of the time, this technology requires a lot of time, it requires a lot of effort, and that effort sometimes comes from universities, right? So we get a lot of our inspiration, a lot of our deep tech from universities with whom we try to partner as closely as possible. And the Zeiss Innovation Hub in Dresden, we have another one in Karlsruhe, also in Germany. So we have 2 innovation hubs that are located in Germany. And these are the hubs that enable that. And this is a little bit of what it looks like. And that's my favorite office. And what is the rationale behind having this kind of a system? Why do we need this? Why do we need an innovation hub? Why can't you just have an office where you're making a lot of money and you're approaching new customers and you're making sales? The rationale behind this is that you need to be close to where you're getting the technology from. You need to place yourself in an ecosystem which will enable you to get access to that technology faster, to enable these universities to trust you as a partner rather than seeing you as a corporate company that is coming to grab IP from them. And then even the IP terms get better. Like, I can assure you of that if you're a corporate that's thinking, oh, but university IP is very complicated. What you need to do is think of them as a long-term partner rather than a transactional relationship. And this is quite different from the rest of the Zeiss, because Zeiss as a whole, of course, sells products. We sell technology to our customers. But here, we are not listening to our customers anymore. We are trying to balance the customer focus that we have with this technology-inspired innovation. But again, even while being placed at a university, it's still very difficult to get that technology converted into a product. These 2 words in a sentence sound very close, from a technology to a product, but there's a huge gap between them. And many a times, we think of universities and we ask them, OK, what innovation are you working on? But honestly, the thing is, universities are very often working on inventions. Invention and innovation are not the same thing. And invention only becomes innovation when it's combined with the other things. So you need to combine it with the viability and the desirability in the market from the consumers. What are the applications that you can develop with this technology, right? And this is where that close partnership between academia and industry can really help you with technology-inspired innovation. Because you can go to a company and say, I have a technology, can you sell this? And most likely, you will be unsuccessful as a university. And it also doesn't work vice versa. So both the university and the company need to work together, actually, to make this happen. And usually the customer-driven view is we need to start with a good list of the customer needs and then develop the technology that solves it. But that usually limits you to a very small section of innovation. That is either incremental or at the most leap innovation. You're not disrupting anything if you think like this. Maybe the solution is that you start with a technology. So maybe you can start with working on a breakthrough technology. So let's say that I discover tomorrow's electronics solution, right? I discover something at a university. And I work on this, and I think, OK, how can I place this in the market? But still, it only will work very limitedly, because by the time you actually come to market, everyone else around you is also in the market. So again, you are not disrupting anything by doing that. So the only way to actually make disruption happen is if you work on both together. So you, as a company, especially corporate companies, and this is really my request to all the corporate companies that are listening here, if there are any, that when a startup comes to you with a technology, or when a university team comes to you with a technology, don't just think about tomorrow. Think about 10 years from now, because you could be the difference between actually bringing a breakthrough technology to market and that breakthrough technology dying on the desk of a researcher. So I really urge everyone to think about this. So the next time you actually come across a new technology, sit down with your team and think about a few questions. So the question is, what new capabilities is this technology providing me with, right? You need to think about the capabilities and not just thinking of the technology as a product. You shouldn't be thinking, OK, how can I sell this? The question is, what is this enabling me to do, right? The second question is, what are the assumptions that we need to make the technology viable? So we really need to think a lot about the brainstorming. Of course, we are all familiar with the design thinking method and everything. But honestly, working in corporate can sometimes make you a little bit jaded. So it's very easy to say no. But love the idea for 5 minutes. That would be my suggestion in the case of new technologies. And the third thing is that if you were to give this technology to a small group of people with unlimited resources, what would they come up with? So what could a long-term vision with no limitations get you? And honestly, working in the innovation hub sometimes does feel like that, although in reality that's not true. But an innovation hub model does help give the feeling that, yes, anything is possible. Yes, we can make it happen. We can talk to university groups without thinking about the hours that we are putting into talking to them, because the magic happens in those moments in between, right? So yeah, I would urge all of you here to think about getting inspired by technology and happy innovating. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, happy to take them.
네, 질문 있으시면은 질문 부탁드리겠습니다. 저희 한국어로 질문하셔도 됩니다. 저희 뒤에 번역기가 있어서 한국어 질문도 저희가 전달해 드릴 수 있으니까요. 질문 있으신 분들께서는 자유롭게 질문 부탁드리겠습니다. Anyone who have questions? 네, 마이크 전달 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 우선 그 PT 해주신 거 정말 도움이 많이 됐고, 이제 질문을 드리고 싶은 것은 조금 기술에 좀 더 포커스를 둬서 고객이 그런 기술에 있어서 얘기하는 고객들의 목소리를 어떨 때는 자기가 조금 그 기술에 있어서 고집을 갖고 있어야 된다. 그걸 밀고 나갈 때가 필요하다라는 말씀을 하셨는데 그런 초기 창업자에 있어서 그런 본인의 아이디어, 본인의 기술과 이 고객의 목소리에 있어서 좀 추상적인 질문일 수도 있습니다. 근데 그런 밸런스를 어떻게 유지를 해야 될지 그래서 제 분야를 말씀드리면 저는 헬스케어 디바이스에 있어서 고객들이 필요한 것을 만들려고 하는데 여기서 그 기술과 고객의 목소리 간의 밸런스에 대해서 질문을 드리고 싶습니다.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good question because I'm also from the healthcare industry. And so the good thing here is that I'm telling you my perspective both as a customer and a technology provider. Because I used to be a physician in a hospital, and I was the one who was buying this technology from these tech companies, right? But now I'm on the technology side, and I'm thinking about what to build tomorrow. So when it comes to this sort of customer need balance with technology, I think it's important that as a startup, so when you are in the beginning stages, you really need to understand what are the unmet needs with the customer, right? So once you have solved the unmet needs, so you have this base technology with which you are solving the unmet needs, but beyond that, if you keep asking the customer, okay, what else do you need? Because this is exactly what happened with Medtronic. They really came up with a great customer problem to solve, which was glucose monitoring. But then they kept going back to the customer to ask, okay, what else do you need? But that's where you can't really do that. If the base technology is solved, the customer will be happy. Because with a customer, it's more about the adequacy than the improvement in the level of technology of a solution. So have the base technology ready, and then beyond that, you really need to start thinking, okay, what is the enabling technology for this? So for example, if you're building a CGM, right? If you're building a continuous glucose monitor, then maybe there are some technologies in the semiconductor industry which have just become available that could transform the CGM industry. So that's where this technology-inspired innovation concept comes in. I hope that that answered your question.
네, 답변 되셨을까요?
네, 감사합니다.
네, 고맙습니다. 계속해서 다음 질문 받아보도록 할 텐데요. 질문 있으신 분들 자유롭게 손 들어줘. 네, 마이크 전달 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hello, startup here. I would like to ask you, you covered a little bit of how big companies can collaborate on innovation. How should startups approach those big companies? You mentioned a lot about asking your customer. Well, sometimes our customers can be big companies, and sometimes it's hard, that part of communication. So if you have any tips there on how we should approach you guys, and maybe just share some stories.
Yeah, I'll share what I can in 2 minutes because I don't want to cross the time limit. But it's really about who you approach in the big company. So I know that sometimes it's very difficult to find. I understand that. But for example, I actually met with a bunch of companies now where they said, we've already spoken to Zeiss. Zeiss said no. So my question was, okay, who did you speak with? They had usually spoken with the ventures team or the business units, right? They are focused on making money for Zeiss so that we, sitting in our little innovation rooms, can innovate, right? So we are super interested in talking to startups, even if it means that maybe we don't invest in you. Maybe it doesn't mean that we buy your technology right away. You don't need us to do that. You need us to support you to co-develop the technology and do that without judgment, right? Because with approaching a big corporate company who could be a potential customer, you need to basically come on that as you're coming on a first date, right? You need to present the best version of yourself. But when you approach corporate research and technology, for example, you don't need to do that. You can tell us your flaws. You can tell us your problems. Tell us how we can help you solve them. Maybe we will brainstorm that with you. So that's very important, who you approach. And also the question is how you approach them. So if you are approaching a business unit, try to think of what makes sense to them. And here I'm not just talking about Zeiss, I'm talking about that person. Is that a salesperson? Do they need to just make more sales? Or are they a technology person where getting a new technology in would give them a raise? So think of the person individually and also think about who in the company you're talking to. That would be my advice.
네, 그럼 이상으로 저희 준비된 세션 모두 마치도록 하겠습니다. Thank you for your insightful
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.